on, I've actually prepared some questions for you, if that's all right.
No? Yeah. I hope
You
so.
don't know what they
Yeah.
are either, so we're going to surprise you. So first question is, there's been a big push to keep cases of divorce out of and separation out of the courts, and it seems like there are more and more ways of being introduced to resolve the end of marriages and relationships. Can you talk us through them?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different options now, what's called ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution, to try and keep things out of court. The courts, unfortunately, are creaking under the pressure of courts and proceedings and litigants in person, and just generally they haven't got enough judges to be dealing with the number of cases that are coming through. So court should always be the last resort, because you don't necessarily want a judge who's not met you deciding what happens with your assets and your children. And it's the way of alternative dispute resolution is a way of trying to keep the parties in control so they can decide their own future. So mediation is one of the most common ones that people probably will have heard of. And effectively, it's where a neutral, independent, trained third party will assist parties in negotiating. So they'll sit around the table, a bit like we are now. They'll talk to what the parties want, and they hopefully will try and steer conversations and negotiations so they reach an agreement between them. The mediator can't make any decisions for them though. So actually their role is to sort of advise what the law is and what the process would be and focus the minds. But ultimately it's down to the parties to reach that agreement. After that is what's called collaborative law. We've got a couple of collaborative lawyers at the Dutton Gregory who are fantastic. And that's a bit like you see in the American courtroom dramas where they'll sit around a table, but they have a lawyer with them each.
Right.
So it's again round table negotiations. They don't have anyone that makes the decision for them. But unlike mediation where there's one neutral party, they each have their lawyer, so they can get advice during the course of the negotiations. They can have breakout rooms where they can go and get advice. And again, it's a round table negotiation process, but with the benefit of legal assistance during the process. After that's what's called arbitration. So arbitration is where someone will actually make a decision. And it's a bit like going through the court process, but going straight to a final hearing. So the parties agree all of the evidence, all of the bundles, all of the paperwork, and then they agree that the arbitrator, who will be a trained person, often a barrister or a solicitor or a retired judge, will effectively then make a decision, be it on arrangements for children, division of assets. They have civil arbitration as well. And then effectively they are bound by whatever the arbitrator decides. So it's a bit like court, but without having the judge manage each phase of the case. And then something that's just recently come out is there's a new scheme called Resolution Together. Resolution Together effectively is where the parties will appoint one lawyer who assists both of them in negotiating and reaching an agreement and helps them with the financial disclosure process. But it only works where it's not a contentious situation, and otherwise the lawyer will be conflicted. So the Resolution Together process effectively means that the professional will assist in getting the evidence together and parties hopefully negotiating and drafting up an agreed order from there.
It's good though. It's good to hear that there's other ways. You know, I think again the whole, old, how people think of family law and these feuding couples, and they've broken up and it's going to go straight to court, and it's not like that, And it's good that these other things are in place to avoid it. Court's costly and timely and stressful.
Yeah.
So my other question. It brings me on to actually no fault divorce. I think that came into effect a couple of years ago, didn't it? Can you explain what it is and whether it has been a success and other things that people need to think about around no fault divorce?
Yeah, of course. It's definitely a way of taking the tension out of separating. The lady was called Trini Owens, so it's quite a famous case, and effectively she was kind of the pioneer for this, and she wanted a divorce and her husband was opposing it. And it meant that she was struggling to actually have the divorce and get out of the marriage. And the judge effectively said, well, actually, one party shouldn't be left stuck in a loveless marriage. And so a lot of Resolution, a lot of family campaign groups got behind it and said, actually, we need to change the law. Why do you need to find fault? If one person believes the marriage is broken down, then they shouldn't be forced to stay together. So what it means now is that you can just petition for a divorce on the grounds the marriage is broken down beyond any chance of reconciliation or irretrievable breakdown. And you can either petition as one party or you can petition together as a joint divorce application. So it's a lot more streamlined. Parties can do it a lot more themselves, but it does present risks because there's a conception that parties will believe, well, actually, once we've divorced, we've got our final order of divorce, that's it, we're separated and our finances move on. And that doesn't work, and that's not the case. Actually, you can have the divorce finished, parties can be separated, but unless you've got a financial order in place, there is still an opportunity for either of them to make a financial claim against the other. And that, I think, is something we're trying to educate people on. and saying just because you got the divorce, you need to make sure there's a financial order which either has a clean break provision or looks at how the assets are divided up so that your ex-partner cannot come back any point in the future and make a claim if you inherit money, for example.
So that's a worry. So I could, have a startup business, go through a no fault divorce. The business isn't worth much anyway. I'm not worried about it. Don't have any financial provision in place. And then 25 years later, my ex-spouse could come back and I've got a multi-million-pound empire,
And they
which
can
is
claim on
always my
that.
dream.
Yeah.